Dawn did not ask whether Rome had made me legal. It arrived the way river weather always arrives, wet iron in the nose, thin light on black water, and the sound of other people already working harder than the officers who would later write about them. Armin's drums kept their building pace across the dark fields, not charge, construction, spikes, deckboards, the patience of a host that believed morning belonged to it. I buckled the cracked scutum and felt the spine give a hair under the strap. Information, not omen. Tiro stood with the signum where civilians could see cloth before they saw my face. Hanno had both hands on the ferry rail and a look that said the chain had spoken true iron all night. Cassian leaned on his cane at the mound steps, legs packed, eyes already angry at the day. Rufus met me with sealed wax calm. No speeches, he said. Places. Places, I agreed. He studied my eyes for glow and found none. Good. Eagle sight still cost blood and purple when I spent it like a drunk spends coin. I had kept it shut since the warehouse week, except when a wound forced it open, and even then only in flashes. Gaius passed with his reserve and offered a crisp hope that I would be prudent. I returned a correct salute and nothing else. Livia watched him go, tablets under her arm, hair tied like a woman who expected ink and fire in the same hour. He will be brave in the report he writes about himself, she said. Then we write ours first. She almost smiled. The hour owned no more light than that. I opened the panel without sight, not for comfort, for inventory. Lucius Varro, level 14, experience 5,550 of 7th Restum Habinet, strength 12, endurance 14, agility 13, vitality 13, intelligence 15, skill echoes, shield hook, battle ready, arrow step, novice, boar brace, novice, echo slots 3 of 3, legal iron, ugly angles, a river still ours, lock break gone into memory nausea, boar brace still stinking of cart mud and sandbag drills, the cracked scutum, the decree tablet Livia had forced into existence under marble. None of it made the drums quieter. Rufus gathered the officers on the ferry mound while the sky went from black to the color of old blade oil. 2 centurions from the fort's remaining strength stood with me. Old Capito of the 2nd, grey at the temples and missing 2 fingers. Young Naevius of the 4th, quick tongue, good drill, untested under a full host. My own mixed century filled the gaps between them like mortar between stones that did not quite match. Armin builds a spiked approach at the lower ford and a false pressure on the upstream shallows, Rufus said. He wants the chain, the lane, and the eagle soldier. He will accept 2 of 3 if the 3rd costs him too much. Capito spat. He will accept all 3 if we stand pretty. We will not stand pretty, Rufus said. Lucius holds temporary tactical command of 3 centuries on the open ground between the stake lane and the first rise. Capito left, Naevius right, Lucius center and overall call under my horn. I hold the ferry, the fort gate, and final withdrawal order. Gaius keeps the South Reserve and does not invent a 4th war. Gaius's mouth thinned. As ordered, Rufus repeated, and the words were a nail. Cassian caught my sleeve when the knot broke. 3 centuries is not a crown, he said. It is 3 ways to bleed at once. Do not chase levels, chase intervals. I know. You know with your mouth. Keep knowing with your feet. Tiro raised the signum a handspan. Men dressed to it without being told. That was healthier than dressing to me. I walked the stake lane once before full light. Refugee slingers checked stones. Sava counted vinegar and water skins with a face like a closed ledger. Secundus stood at the custody wall with the 56 still registered under fort seals. The 3 temporary raiders from the refugee road still separate. Odo asleep sitting up, Beran breathing with effort. 2 fever deaths among old hostiles had already been struck with dates and witnesses. Secundus did not do poetry. He did Who is Here? If the field goes red, I told him, you do not open those seals for volunteers with bright eyes. Custody stays custody. Yes, Centurion. Pellis on the ferry hummed against the chain. If they take it, I sink the deck on order. On Rufus's order or mine, I said. Not on panic, on order. Ileos arrived with spare tablets and a spear he still held like a guilty pen. Also checked his interval twice, then a third time because he had asked last night whether level 14 meant he should stand closer to me. I had told him to stand closer to his interval. He looked as if he were trying to obey both pride and sense. The drums across the fields changed, one long, two short, then a harder beat under it, like mallets on decking. Places, I said, and the word went down the line without glow, without marble, without anything the system could tax. I made one more circuit that Dawn refused to hurry. The cracked scutum strap needed a twist to sit true. I gave it the twist and accepted the complaint in my shoulder as rent due. Capito's Optio asked whether temporary tactical command meant he took orders from my hand or only from Rufus's horn. Both, I told him, and if the two ever disagreed, he was to obey the horn and then shout at me afterward. He liked that enough to stop looking at me like a shrine. A cook tried to hand me warm porridge. I made him hand it to the right file boys first. Officers who eat while the seam starves teach the wrong religion. The porridge smelled better than victory and worse than home. I took 3 spoons when the boys had eaten and called it logistics. Far drums thudded. Nearer, someone dropped a helmet and cursed the gods of Greece. Ordinary sounds remained a wall. I put my palm on the ferry rail until wood grain steadied my pulse, then took the palm away because rails are not charms and men were watching to see whether I believed in charms. Secundus found me before full light with a question about the 3 temporary raiders if the lane broke. They stay sealed and separate, I said. If the wall itself burns, you move them under guard to the fort cellar, with the 56 still counted apart. No volunteers, no clever mergers. He repeated the order back without ornament. I trusted him more for the lack of ornament than for any oath. Command did not feel like a promotion. It felt like being handed 3 leaking buckets and told the village would drink or die by how I walked. Capito's sentry took the left with stakes already driven in a shallow chevron. His men were older, quieter, mean in the efficient way of people who had buried friends without speeches. Naevius's sentry took the right with cleaner shields and eyes that flicked too often toward my cracked scutum, as if cracks were contagious. My mixed sentry held center. Hanno, Tiro, Orso, the ferry hands who still smelled of pitch, the winter survivors who knew my faults well enough to stand in them. Livia set a runner post behind the center with colored cloth strips, red for water, white for arrows, green for medical pullback, black for Rufus's withdrawal horn only. No invented signals, she said. If you invent, you own the corpses. I will not invent. You will want to. Wanting is not permission. Gaius drilled his South Reserve in polished silence. Useful, dangerous, both could be true. Rufus kept him on a short leash of written orders Ilios copied twice. I spent the first half hour on logistics because stats do not fill canteens. Water skins, short by 30 on the right. Naevius had assumed the fort well would keep walking to him. It would not. I stripped 10 skins from my center and 8 from Capito, took the complaint without theater, and put 2 boys on a continuous carry from the river under Hanno's eye. Strength 12 did not make water lighter. It made my arms last longer while I helped haul the first load so the boys would not think the work beneath an officer. Arrows, plentiful in the fort, thin on the field. Capito had hidden a cache under oilcloth and not told Naevius, because Naevius talked. I made them share and watched Naevius flush. Talk less, Capito said, almost kind, bleed on schedule. Panic arrived before the first charge, dressed as a mule. The mule bolted from a cook fire when a northern horn tested the air. It ran through Naevius's second file, knocked a man into a stake, and turned a straight line into a knot. 2 recruits raised shields against the mule as if it were a champion. One screamed for me by title as if level 14 could unfrighten animals. I did not open sight. I grabbed the mule's head rope, got dragged 2 steps, planted, and turned it into Capito's horse holder like a shameful prize. Tie it or kill it, I told the nearest cook. Do not let it write our first report. Men laughed, short and grateful. Laughter lowered shoulders. Shoulders win more minutes than slogans. Cassian, cane-braced at the rear post, barked intervals. If you can laugh, you can measure. They measured. Tiro walked the signum along the center so the right and left could dress without staring at the dark fields. A child in the refugee lane cried. A mother clapped a hand over the mouth and looked at me as if I might punish sound. I shook my head once. Sound was human. Human was still allowed. Rufus's runner brought the final disposition tablet. I read it aloud so no man could claim later that orders had been private magic. Hold the open ground until the ford construction is broken or until the Black Horn. Do not pursue past the first rise. Do not accept single combat offers. Do not open custody. Civilians to marked roofs first. Ferry chain holds until Rufus or Lucius orders sink. Navius asked, "What if Armin himself comes to the center? Then you keep your century's interval, and you do not sell me your men for a story," I said. "If I fall, Capito calls the center. If Capito falls, you call it. If you fall, Tiro keeps the signum where living files can see it, and the nearest Optio dresses the line. The system does not promote the dead." Capito grunted approval. Navius swallowed and nodded. I checked bore brace in the dirt with Hanno pushing a shield on a rope. Early, late, true. On the true plant, Hanno's boots slid and he swore with respect. Novice still, conditional still. A post in the ground, not a god. Arrow step I refused to show off on wet grass. Novice lateral movement under missiles had already taught me that pride and ankles were enemies. Shield hook sat in my bones at battle ready, the one tool I trusted when feints made bore brace go dark. Across the fields, the host's front ranks became visible as the light hardened. Oval shields, mixed spears, wolf and boar marks, ponies on the flanks, a darker knot of silver-fastened cloaks behind the first rise. Construction teams dragged spiked decking toward the lower ford like beetles under timber. "Ugly," Hanno said. "Clear enough," I said. Experience did not come from watching. The panel stayed quiet. Waiting paid nothing. Waiting still kept us alive. I walked Navius's line with him and made him name each contubernium's weak ankle, weak temper, and best thrower. He stumbled on the third name, Capito, trailing like a grey conscience, supplied it without mercy. "Know them before the field teaches you with corpses," Capito said. Navius flushed and repeated the whole list until it stuck. My own century needed less introduction and more reminders. I told Hanno to watch my left eye for stupid glow. I told also that intervals were still his religion. I told the ferry hands that if they died heroically on the wrong side of a stake, I would find their ghosts. They snorted. Snorts are morale. Gaius sent a second polished message offering to stiffen the center with quality. Rufus intercepted it and returned it with a single wax stab. I did not need to read the stab to know its vocabulary. Still, I kept Gaius's position in my head like a sharp tool on a high shelf. Useful, cutty, not for children. When the first northern horn tested the air, 3 centuries flinched in 3 different rhythms. I raised a hand and forced the flinch into stillness. "That horn owns nothing yet," I said. "Our horn owns places. Stand in them." I checked the cracked scutum one last time against a stake, listening for the spine's complaint. It complained. I kept it anyway until it failed in public, because switching early would have looked like nerves, and nerves travel faster than orders. Cassian watched the choice and said nothing, which was permission of a kind. They came first at the water, because water is where patience becomes boards. The lower ford had always been a cheat of shallows and bad footing. Armin's people meant to cheat it back with spikes, decking, and bodies willing to stand in cold until the cold stopped mattering. From the mound I saw the first team rush the near bank with mallets and a frame of lashed poles. Archers covered them from the far side. A second team waited with a longer deck section like a floating door. Rufus's ferry ballistae spoke first. 1 bolt took a pole, 1 took a man. The host did not scatter. They adjusted. That adjustment frightened me more than screaming would have. "Center forward 20 paces," I called. "Left refuse the bank. Right watch ponies. No one enters the water without my hand. We moved. Mud took ankles. The cracked scutum bumped my knee. Tiro's signum made a small, bright wound in the grey air. Northern skirmishers met us with javelins. One skipped off my rim. One took a man in Capito's second file through the thigh. Green cloth went up. Medical pullback began without a speech. Navius's clean shields took 2 hits and held. Good. Then the spike-board captain came himself. He was broad, bare-armed despite the cold, with a hammer on one shoulder and a short spear in the other hand. His men loved him enough to match his pace. That is a kind of rank the system cannot invent. I risked eagle sight for 1 heartbeat. Pain stabbed the left eye immediately. The world gained edges. KORR, level 11, strength heavy, endurance high, agility moderate, vitality high. Injury, old shoulder scar, mastered skills, none shown. Open techniques, shock hammer, wet foot rush, sight closed under a white spike. Blood warmed the tear line. Purple bloomed at the edge of vision. I tasted metal. Hammerman is the hinge, I said. Capito, pin his left. Hanno with me. Navius, keep the ponies off our backs, or I will feed you to them. Kor saw me and chose me, which was either intelligence or vanity. Both kill. He came with a true commit. Hips, hammer, the whole weight of a man who believed boards mattered more than breath. Bore brace opened. I planted, turned the angle, and let his own rush teach him about mud and a cracked scutum spine that still held for one more insult. The hammer blew a chunk from my rim and numbed my arm to the elbow. Strength 12 kept the shield from rotating into my face. Barely. Shield hook found his spear shaft when he tried to recover. I turned it, stepped inside, and put the boss into his teeth. He staggered, still dangerous. Hanno's boat hook took his ankle. Capito's nearest file closed like a door. Kor went down thrashing. We bound him alive because live leaders talk and dead ones become flags. Experience gained, 850. The panel flickered at the edge of pain. Experience 6,400 of 7,200. No level. Good. Receipts without fantasy. The decking team tried to push while we were busy with Kor. Capito's refused bank caught them with stakes and thrown stones from the refugee slingers. A boy hit a mallet man in the ear and whooped. I did not whoop. I moved the boy 2 paces back so his joy would not eat him. Forward only to the wet line, I shouted. Do not become swimmers for pride. Navius almost overextended on the right when 3 ponies fainted. I sent Tiro's signum dip as the agreed check. Navius saw it, cursed, and held. Learning in public is ugly. Ugly keeps men breathing. The host pulled the first deck section back under arrow cover. Not retreat, reset. Construction drums resumed as if we had been weather. Rufus's horn gave a short approval note from the ferry. Not victory, acknowledgement. We had broken the first build without selling the chain. I wiped blood from my eye with a cloth Livia's runner slapped into my hand. Sight? The runner asked. Flash only, I said. Do not write that I am blind. Write that I am spending carefully. Cassian's voice carried from the rear post. Careful is not optional. I raised a hand. He lowered the cane a fraction. On the far bank, a taller figure watched from among silver clasps, too far for safe sight, close enough for the skin under my straps to understand the day had not started. After Kor went to bonds, I forced myself to look at the water the way a farmer looks at a ditch that will flood whether he curses it or not. Cold climbed the bank in a visible skin. A man who stepped too deep would lose feet before he lost courage. I pulled 2 eager fools back by harness and put them on stone duty. Heroes freeze, I said. Workmen rotate. Rufus's ballistae spoke again, slower, stingier with bolts. Good. Bolts are a treasury. Capito's refused bank made a northern mallet team waste effort on stakes that bit back. Navius wanted to push into the shallows when the decking retreated. I refused him with a signum dip and a stare. Pursuit past the wet line was how pretty centuries become names on boards. Blood from my tier line crusted. I did not wipe it for the crowd. Let them see the tax. Sight was not free, and I would not teach them that it was. Hanno took Kor's hammer away and tossed it behind our line like trash that could still kill a foot. Tools later, he said. Ankles now. I loved him for reducing the world to ankles. Ankles are honest. They tested the lane next, because lanes are where civilians become levers. Ladder teams came out of a fold of ground we had marked as dead and learned was only resting. 6 ladders, 2 false, 4 true. Behind them, a wedge of oval shields aimed not at my center but at the seam between center and navius, where clean shields met winter mud and pride could open a door. Seam also yelled, blessed boy. Navius, close on me half file, I called. Capito, hold left and do not get heroic. Tiro, signum to the seam. We compressed. Compression is a skill. Recruits treat it like hugging. Veterans treat it like making a wall out of people who dislike each other. The first ladder hit our stake line and bounced. The second hooked a post and stayed. Men swarmed. I took the ladder edge with shield hook as if it were a rim and dumped the lead climber onto his mates. Not bore brace. Different problem, different tool. Then Fen arrived. He wore no helmet, hair tied with a strip of black cloth, a long knife and a hooked pole made for peeling shields. He moved like a man who had practiced on doors. Sight flash, shorter, meaner. Fen, level 12, agility high, strength moderate, knife, hook pole, injury, none visible, skill marks, seam finder, climb rush. Purple flared harder. I staggered a step. Tiro's shoulder bumped mine without looking like support, which is the only support worth having in front of frightened men. Hook pole, I told Hanno. He peels. Do not give him a clean rim. Fen came for the seam with a commit that looked like a feint until the last stride. Bore brace flickered, uncertain. I refused the plant and used arrow step, one short lateral on bad grass. My ankle rolled and recovered. Novice tax paid in almost 4. Fen's hook kissed empty air where my rim had been. Capito's nearest spear took his thigh. I hooked his polearm, turned, and put him into the stakes hard enough that the wood answered. He tried to rise. Navius, to his credit, did not finish him for theatre. Bonds, 2 men, a knee on the safe side of cruelty. Experience gained, 800. Experience, 7,200 of 7,200. Level 15 reached. Experience, 0 of 8,400. 1 free stat point available. The golden choice lines waited behind my eyes like polite knives. I put the point into strength while still moving, because boards and hammers and cracked rims had argued all morning that arms decide whether angles become graves. Strength 12 became 13. No choir sang. My shoulder simply hurt less like failure and more like work when I reset the scutum. Lucius Varro, level 15. Experience, 0 of 8,400. Strength 13. Endurance 14. Agility 13. Vitality 13. Intelligence 15. The true panic came not from Fen, but from a firepot that broke wrong. It struck a refugee roof on the lane edge and climbed curtains like a live thing. Someone screamed the fort was lost. Someone else screamed the chain was cut. Neither was true. Truth does not matter when throats invent weather. A file on Navius's right turned toward the smoke. Turning is how lines become herds. Signum, I snapped. Tiro planted and raised. I grabbed the nearest turning man by the harness and shoved him back into interval hard enough to make him hate me. Hate is fine. Hate still stands. Green cloth for burn wounded only, I shouted. Red cloth, water to the roof. Sava owns the buckets. Soldiers own the seam. If you chase smoke, you chase Armin's second plan. Livia was already at the lane with the bucket station she had promised a woman at dawn. No speech, names, points, a child with a wet cloak beating sparks. The roof blackened and failed to become a general fire because ordinary people refused the story of inevitable loss. Navius shook. I almost followed them. You almost, I said. You did not. Mark the difference and live. Capito barked a short laugh. Welcome to command, boy. The ladder wedge broke into knots and pulled back under pony cover. We did not pursue past the first rise. Rufus's orders held. My hunger to make the panel move did not. Cassian cane-walked 3 paces closer despite orders and looked at my eye. Bleeding. Flash. Count your flashes like arrows. When they are gone, you are a man with a stick. I know. Then act like the knowing costs something. Behind the far rise, silver clasps shifted. Construction drums stumbled, then found a harder rhythm. The first build had failed. The host began preparing the open ground itself. The field between our stakes and their rise was still brown with old winter. It would not stay brown. When the roof fire failed to become a general fire, the host tried a smaller cruelty. Smoke pots rolled along the ground toward the seam. Smoke makes men invent enemies. I put wet cloths over mouths and made the center step through instead of away. Stepping through smoke is an act of faith in the man whose shoulder you keep touching. We touched shoulders. We came out coughing and still dressed. Fen, bound, watched us with bright hate. I had Ilias note his seam tools and the black cloth in his hair. Livia would want the note. Evidence is a second battlefield. I did not gloat at Fen. Gloating is how you stop watching the next ladder. Level 15 sat in me like a new strap. Tighter, not magical. Strength 13 made the spare shield feel less like betrayal when I took it later. At that moment, I only knew my hands shook less on the next rim. After the smoke, Tiro wiped his eyes and said, "You shoved that turning man hard. Hard enough to keep him living," I said. "If he wants an apology, he can have it after the horns stop." Tiro nodded, then added, "I would have shoved you too." "Good," I said. The relationship refused to freeze in protection. The field needed that refusal. There is a moment in every fight when the enemy is not the loudest problem. The loudest problem becomes water, arrows, rumor, and the way a century looks at a burning roof and decides whether orders are still real. Level 15 did not solve that. Strength 13 did not fill a skin. Intelligence 15 only made the shortages arrange themselves into a clearer insult. After Fen and the firepot, I pulled the 3 centuries 5 paces back from the wet line and made them breathe on purpose. Men forget breathing when they have been brave for 20 minutes. They turn blue around the mouth and call it courage. "Drink," I ordered, 2 swallows. If you finish the skin, you say so. Lying about water is how lines die polite. Navius's right was worst. His boys had fought cleanly and then stared at smoke until their tongues stuck. I put Capito's water carriers through them like a second hinge and accepted Capito's glare. Glare is free. Collapse costs everything. Livia's cloth post had become a small weather system. Red, white, green, black. Runners slipped. One boy from the refugee lane, no armor, too much heart, tried to take a white cloth run and almost earned an arrow for civic pride. I caught his shoulder. "Stones only," I said. "Cloth is for people who know the horn codes. You want to help, you feed the slingers, and you do not invent a rank." He hated me. He obeyed. Both acceptable. Sava cornered me with a vinegar-stained finger in my chest, carefully away from the newer bruises. Medical skins are down 1/3. If you keep sending green cloth for every scraped knee, I will start triaging officers last out of principle. Triage by bleeding and breath, I said. Officers included. If I come in talking, put me at the back. You always come in talking. Then put me at the back. She almost spat on my boots and instead shoved a clean cloth into my hand for the eye. Partnership takes many forms. Ilios tried to write while walking and walked into a stake. Cassian, still then at the rear post with his cane, barked, "Write after you bleed less ink." Ilios apologized to the stake. The century needed that small, stupid thing. Laughter thinned the next fear. I checked the ferry with a runner. Chain true. Deck unburned, Pellis sober with purpose, Rufus holding the mound like a nail holds a shutter, Gaius's reserve still where ordered, polished and hungry, upstream shallows showing men with poles, faint or second build, not yet a full truth. Do we thin the center to stiffen the right? Navius asked me, quiet enough that only pride could overhear. No, I said, we stiffen the right with your own second file stepping 2 paces and with Capito's loaned 8. If I thin the center, Armin will notice the first time he cares to look. He is looking. Navius followed my gaze to the rise. The silver clasps had not moved much. That stillness was a kind of pressure. Also asked Centurion, if the cloth colors run out of meaning because too many go up at once, what then? Then the signum becomes the only sentence, I said, and Tiro becomes the grammar. Protect the grammar. Tiro heard his name and did not puff. He adjusted his grip and watched the seams. Good. A fresh rumor ran the left. The fort gate had opened to surrender. False. I put Capito on it with 3 words. Kill the rumor. He killed it by walking the left with his missing finger hand raised and asking each contubernium who had seen the gate with their own eyes. No one had. Rumor died of embarrassment. Better than dying of steel, but only slightly less contagious before the cure. I took 10 heartbeats with my forehead against the spare scutum rim and let the system stay dark. No panel, no comfort, just wood grain and other men's sweat. Hanno said, "You are thinking like a clerk." "I am trying," I said. "Battle wants me to think like a spark. Sparks burn stores. Cassian will be proud enough to insult you. That is his love language." We both looked toward the rear post. Cassian was arguing with a medic about whether cane-braced men could still throw. The medic was losing. Of course he was. Across the field, the host adjusted again. Oval shields, fresh faces, a cart with something under cloth that might have been more decking or might have been a message made of meat. I did not open sight. I sent slingers to make the cart's oxen reconsider their careers. Stones thumped hide. The cart turned, small win, unpaid by the system, still real. Places, I said again, and the word had become a drum of our own. Capito spat. Next wave will not be polite. None of them are, I said. Polite is what Gaius will call his report. Navius snorted despite himself. The right stood a little taller. Panic math is not only subtraction. Sometimes you add a joke and the column holds. Livia passed behind the center with a tablet for Rufus and a second tablet for me. Civilian count on roofs, bucket station status, which mule had failed, which children knew the older word. She did not ask if I was winning. She asked if I could hold 20 more minutes without inventing a horn. 20, I said. After that, I will bargain with the next 20. Bargain with water first, she said, then with men. Last with your eyes. She left. The drums across the field changed pitch. The red field, still only partly red, waited to become its name in full. I raised my hand. 3 centuries watched it, no glow. Only a farmer's son's fingers, scarred, telling other people's sons where to put their fear so it would not trample them. Forward to the stake shadows, I ordered. No farther until I pull. Dress, breathe. If you love your neighbor, keep your interval from him so he can swing. They moved. Stats did not move them. Places did. I held a short council of feet, no stools, no speeches, with Capito, Navius, Hanno, and Tiro, while runners changed cloth. If Armin faints upstream, we do not strip the strip, I said. If he faints the lane, civilians stay on roofs until Livia moves them. If I go down, you do not spend the centuries buying my body. You buy the ferry. Capito nodded. Navius looked sick and nodded. Hanno said, your body still has my hook's warranty. Tiro said, Signum stays even if you do not. That last should have hurt. It comforted me instead. Standards that depend on one man's breath are decorations. A refugee woman offered me a strip of dried meat. I thanked her and gave it to the shaking boy I had swapped off the left. He ate like a wolf and stood like a person again. Economy of kindness. The system paid nothing. The line did. Ilias showed me a running list of cloth raises. Too many greens early. I tightened the rule again. Green for bone, breath, or bleeding that leaves a trail. Bruises wait. Bruises hate waiting. Bruises still wait. Sava backed me with a ladle pointed like a vine staff. Authority takes strange shapes on a river morning. They came onto the open ground in measured waves, and the soil began to learn new color. Not all at once. First, a dark wetness under a man who fell with a javelin in his neck. Then a smear where a pony went down and kicked. Then a wider stain where Capito's left met a rush of oval shields, and neither side had room to be clean. By the time the sun cleared the low cloud, the strip between Stake Lane and First Rise had earned the name the men would use later without poetry, the Red Field. Bram led the first true shock line. He was not tall. He was thick through the chest, with paired oval shields locked to two companions and a short spear held low for the belly. His commit was honest. Boar Brace loves honesty. Brace line, I called. Center plants on true only. Feints get hook. Bram hit like a cart with a face. I planted. Strength 13 made the angle hold where 12 had shivered. The shock travelled my heels into mud. Bram's spear skidded. His left companion tried to peel my rim. Shield hook turned the peel into an open elbow. Hanno filled the gap with the boat hook like a punctuation mark. Bram did not die easy. He dropped the spear, pulled a knife, and cut for my hip scar with the memory of someone who had been told where farmers keep old pain. I took the cut on the scutum edge and felt the crack lengthen with a sound like ice under a boot. Orso's shield covered my right for 1 second of perfect obedience. We put Bram down and bound him while he cursed in 2 languages. Experience gained 1,100. Experience 1,100 of 8,400. The second wave came with ponies. Ulf rode the lead animal as if the pony were a spear with legs. He did not charge the center full. He cut across Navius's front to peel files sideways. The old cavalry insult. Make infantry turn into spectators of their own fear. Refuse right, stakes out, slingers loose on legs, not riders. My voice went raw. Endurance 14 kept it from breaking. Navius held better than I feared. His clean shields finally got dirty. A pony went down screaming. Another leapt a low stake and landed inside the line. For 3 heartbeats, the right became a tavern brawl with iron. I could not be everywhere. Level 15 did not multiply bodies. Intelligence 15 only made the shortage obvious. I sent Capito's third file as a hinge under Tiro's dipped signum and ran myself toward the worst knot with arrow step, burning my calves in short, ugly bursts. Novice, wet grass, 1 near fall. I arrived as Ulf turned his pony for a second pass. Sight flash, forced by need, paid in blood. ULF, level 13. Agility high, strength moderate, spear. Pony knit knees, injury none. Skill marks, cross peel, leg spear. I came in low, not for the man first, for the pony's line. Boar Brace does not love horsemen unless the commit is real. This one was. I planted on the ditch lip, angled, and let animal and rider learn frozen mud again. Ulf flew. He rose with a short sword and a grin that had no humor. Shield hook caught the first cut. The second scored my upper arm and made heat run under the sleeve. Capito's hinge file closed. Ulf went under 3 shields and a net. Experience gained 1,250. Experience 2,350 of 8,400. Blood from my eye mixed with blood from my arm. Distinctions matter to surgeons. On a red field they become the same mud. Gaius's South Reserve twitched forward without order when the ponies broke. Rufus's horn cracked a single negative note. Gaius stopped as if slapped. Good. Knives should stay sheathed until pointed correctly. Livia's white cloth went up, arrows low on the right. Runners moved. Sava cursed a man who drank from a medical skin. Ordinary discipline, the kind that keeps armies from becoming crowds. Cassian shouted from the rear post, "Do not watch the panel, watch the seams." I had not opened the panel. He knew me well enough to yell at the temptation before it finished forming. Sarah came next with the oval shield oath knot. They moved as one animal, not Roman, not chaos, a practiced shoulder and step that made our stakes look suddenly lonely. Sarah herself wore a pale cloak over dark mail and carried a long axe with a counterweight of bone. Her people hummed, a low work hum, not a song. Sight flash, shorter. I could feel the tear line opening like a mouth. Sarah, Level 14, strength high, endurance high, axe, injury, cut brow, fresh. Skills, oath step, shield orchard. Note, formation linked, formation linked. Sight could show the bond as a shimmer along elbows. It could not tell me how to break it without killing the wrong minute. Do not duel the orchard, I told the center. Cut ankles of the outer trees. Hanno, hook left rim. Capito, push their hum off-beat with stakes and shouts. Navius, hold and do not invent glory. We hit them like workmen, not heroes. Also took a bruise that would purple for a week. A man in my second file went down with an axe in his collarbone and did not get up. Green cloth, pullback. The hum faltered when Capito's stakes entered at a wrong rhythm. Sarah turned her axe toward me because stories prefer centers. True commit, bore brace open, plant, turn. The axe blew half my already cracked rim into splinters and numbed the entire arm. Strength 13 kept the boss between my teeth and the bone edge. I stepped in on the rebound and put the remaining scutum into her knee. She dropped to a kneel and still tried to cut. Tiro, not a hero in a marble frieze, jammed the signum butt into the axe haft and spoiled the angle. Hanno finished the bind. Experience gained 1,400. Experience 3,750 of 8,400. I threw the ruined scutum aside and took a spare from the dead man's rack without ceremony. The crack had finished its argument. The spare smelled of other sweat. Fine. Sweat is honest. Signum still up, Tiro said, breath ragged. Keep it up, I said. If it falls, they will invent a worse story. Across the rise, the silver clasp knot tightened. The taller figure stepped one pace forward into better light. Dark cloak, silver boar, spear longer than the men near him. Even without sight, the air around him felt organized. Armin had come to watch his vanguard work, or to end the watching. Between Bram and Ulf, there was a stretch of grinding that earns no songs and ends wars anyway. Shield faces slapped, spears searched for thighs, men slipped on what had been other men. I moved along the center, correcting intervals with my voice and twice with my boot. Cassian would have approved the boot. He always said toes remember better than ears. A javelin took a ferry hand through the foot. He tried to stay planted out of shame. I sent him green cloth back and put a stake man in his place. Shame is not a scutum. Capito caught my eye across the press and tipped his chin. Good call. Approvals from grey men keep you honest. When Sarah's hum faltered, I felt the centuries surge with the hunger to finish. I held them. Finishing too far forward is how vanguards become anvils for the main weight. Hold the shadow of the stakes, I repeated, until the words lost beauty and kept function. Ulf's pony, riderless, ran the length of the strip and died against Capito's stakes with a sound I will not decorate. Capito cut its throat to end the thrashing and moved on. Mercy and logistics shared a knife. I marked the place so no runner would trip the corpse into a worse story. Jaw made the air unsafe. He was the horn and arrow master, a lean man with a recurved bow and a horn that could speak 3 lies and 1 truth in the same breath. His archers did not volley like city troops. They picked seams, runners, and anyone stupid enough to stand still for pride. White cloth had already gone up twice. Now it stayed up. Shields high on the right, moving targets only, no speeches under sky. I moved along the center in a crouch, feeling arrow step itch every time a shaft hit mud near my foot. Novice wanted to dance, mud wanted to claim ankles. I gave each a little and neither everything. A runner with red cloth took an arrow through the calf and kept crawling until another man took the skin. That man I would remember if we lived. Jaw himself climbed a low cart behind his line to see better. Vanity or necessity, both make targets. Slingers, I called to the refugee line. Cartman, legs. Stones flew. One hit the cartwheel. One hit Jaw's hip. He staggered and blew a horn note that pulled 2 pony pairs into a false charge at Capito. Capito did not bite. I loved him for that, more than I could say under arrows. I needed a flash on Jaw and hated the need. Sight, pain like a nail. Purple sheeted half the left world. Jaw, level 13, agility high. Bow, horn codes, injury. hip bruise fresh. Skills, seam mark, false horn. False horn, I shouted. Ignore the triple short unless Rufus echoes. Navius had been half a breath from answering the false note with a forward surge. He locked up, face pale. Understood. We pushed a narrow corridor under shields toward the cart. Not a glorious charge, a moving roof. Hanno and 4 fairy hands made the left wall. I made the right with the spare scutum. Shafts hit wood like hail with opinions. Jaw dropped from the cart and tried to run the seam backward. Boar brace had nothing to say about a running bowman. Shield hook caught empty air once. Arrow step closed the gap in 2 ugly slides. I hit him with the boss and broke the horn against my knee. He knifed my thigh shallow. We bound him. Someone else took the bow away, as if it might blow another lie by itself. Experience gained 1,300. Experience 5,050 of 8,400. I could not see well out of the left eye. Blood and purple shared the lease. Cassian's warning sat in my mouth like a second tongue. No more sight unless the hinge is Armin or the line breaks, I told Hanno. Say it again so I can hit you if you lie. No more sight unless the hinge is Armin or the line breaks. Good. Rufus sent a runner. Upstream shallows showing a second construction feint. Ferry still held. Gaius still contained. Custody unopened. Civilians mostly on marked roofs. The runner's face was burned on one cheek. He delivered the words in the correct order anyway. I sent him back with water and a cloth. The red field widened. Men from both sides lay in shapes that had been plans. Crows watched from the fort ridge, patient as creditors. Howled came with the tusk plate vanguard. I had seen plates like his in the warehouse dark of another fight. Boar tusk edges laced onto leather, made to break rims and courage together. Howled was younger than Armin, older than me. With a laugh he used as a tool. He pointed at my spare scutum and said in accented Latin, "Crack again, eagle." "Work for it," I said. He brought 8, not a full century, a knife meant for the throat of a command. Capito tried to intercept. Hald's left pair screened him with a discipline that made my stomach go cold. This was not raw raid energy. This was practice against Roman intervals. Center, compress. Tiro, signum high. Navius, do not chase the screen. Hald came for me with a true-false true rhythm designed to fish boar brace into a stupid plant. First commit feint, second feint, third true. I held, planted on the third. The skill caught, the tusk plate still split my spare rim a handspan and drove numbness to the shoulder. Strength 13 and a correct angle kept my chest from becoming a story. I hooked the plate's edge, turned and found my lock break, ghost hand opening on empty memory. Nausea flickered. I hated the ghost and used ordinary training. Boot to knee, boss to face, Hanno's hook to wrist. Hal dropped to a knee, still grinning through blood. "Armin wants you looking," he said. "Looking makes you late." We bound him. The grin stayed until a medic's knot took his attention. Experience gained, 1,750. Experience, 6,800 of 8,400. Close to 16, not there. The panel did not care that my hands shook. Torv hit the laneside shed with a ram made of a wagon tongue and spite. The shed held spare stakes and 2 wounded. Torv wanted fire and a hole into the refugee roofs. Sava stood in the doorway with a ladle and a face that promised scalding. Brave, not enough. Capito, hold the orchard remnants. Center with me to the shed. Navius, anchor. We hit Torv's ram crew from the flank. Boar brace took the first rusher into the shed wall. The second learned and came broken rhythm, shield hook, arrow step off a thrown pot. My left eye swam. I fought half by sound, Hanno's breath, Tiro's signum butt striking earth for time, Torv's own roar. Torv was level enough to hurt. I did not flash sight. I fought him as a shape. He broke my spare scutum's boss loose. I dropped the shield and took his ram shaft with both hands like a farmer taking a stubborn plow. Strength 13 and endurance 14 made it a contest instead of a humiliation. Also stabbed under the shaft. Torv fell hard. Bonds, no theater cut. Experience gained 1,600. Experience 8,400 of 8,400. Level 16 reached. Experience 0 of 9,700. 1 free stat point available. I put the point into vitality while leaning on the shed wall, because blood loss and cold and the long hour were arguing louder than pride. Vitality 13 became 14. The world did not brighten. Bleeding did not stop. I simply stayed upright through a wave of nausea that would have put me down 10 minutes earlier. Lucius Varro, level 16, experience 0 of 9,700, strength 13, endurance 14, agility 13, vitality 14, intelligence 15, skill echoes, shield hook, battle ready, arrow step, novice, boar brace, novice, boar brace, still novice. It had saved me and failed me and taxed me. Practice under death is still practice. The rank did not leap for my convenience. Livia appeared at my elbow with a replacement shield and a look that inventoried my pupil. Left eye, she said, spending carefully. Carefully is a word people use while emptying the purse. Rufus asks if the open ground still buys the ferry time. It buys time, I said. It does not buy forever. Nothing does, she said, and was gone with runners. On the rise, Armin lifted his spear once. The host center began to move as if a single spine had replaced 100 arguments. The red field was no longer a test strip. It was the table where he meant to carve a name out of me. Jaw's false horn still echoed in my teeth after the man himself went to bonds. I made every file repeat the rule. Triple short means nothing without Rufus's echo. Men hate repeating rules while bleeding. Men who refuse die of someone else's music. I checked on the refugee slingers and found a girl of 12 with a bruised cheek and a perfect release. Again, I said, same as the boy at dawn. She hit a shield boss at 15 paces and did not smile. Serious children frighten me more than loud ones. I moved her 1 pace behind a stake anyway. Hald's grin after the bind stayed in my mind like a burr. Armin wants you looking. Looking makes you late. I told Tiro to hit my helmet if he saw my eyes go distant without need. He agreed with unsettling enthusiasm. After Torv, I leaned on the shed long enough for Vitality 14 to argue successfully with gravity. Livia's runner asked if I needed the green cloth. I need the shed not to burn, I said, and I need you to keep running. He ran. I stood. Standing was the report that mattered. Merk built a wedge the way a carpenter builds a roof, measured, pegged, meant to bear weather. He took the survivors of Sarah's orchard and the angry remnants of Bram's shock line and made them a triangle with teeth. Behind him walked 2 men in silver boar clasps, not Armin, but close enough that the air went careful. Personal guard out on loan, a compliment that wanted me dead. This is the hinge, Capito said beside me. Breath like a bellows. If we break here, the ferry sees their faces too soon. Then we do not break, I said, and hated how simple it sounded. I gave places, not speeches. Navia's half-file left to thicken Capito. My center refused a pocket, Tiro's signum slightly back so men would dress to cloth, not to my bleeding face. Gaius ordered to hold south unless Rufus horned twice. Iliaeus sent that tablet running. Merk advanced to drum, not Armin's high construction beat, a walking beat, step, step. The red mud sucked sandals and boots alike, equality under filth. At 30 paces, javelins. At 20, the wedge leaned. At 10, faces became personal. True on the point only, I yelled. Sides hook and stake, do not plant on the shoulders. Merk was the point. Big, scarred lips. A heavy spear with a crossbar to stop 2 deep thrusts from trapping the shaft. He feinted plant bait twice. Boar brace stayed dark, honest. On the 3rd motion, the whole wedge committed like a thrown door. I planted. The shock took me back a half step. Vitality 14 kept my vision from whiting out when my teeth clicked. Strength 13 held the angle. Merk's crossbar smashed my new rim and sent splinters into my cheek. Shield hook failed on the 1st try. My numb fingers late. 2nd try caught his shaft. I turned it. Hanno raked the man at Merk's right knee. Capito hit the left shoulder of the wedge with stakes and old men who refused to die for free. Merk dropped the spear and tried to grapple. Lockbreak's ghost rose and vomited memory into my wrists. I did not follow it. I headbutted him with the helmet rim and felt the world ring. Orso and two others piled, bonds. Merk's eyes found mine with something like respect and something like a promise that respect changes nothing. Experience gained, 1,550. Experience 1,550 of 9,700. The wedge broke into ugly pieces. Pieces still cut. A knife found the seam of my greave and drew a line along the shin. A thrown axe missed Tiro by a finger and took a fairy hand in the shoulder. Green cloth, red cloth, white cloth. The runner post became a storm of color. Then the silver boar guards entered the broken wedge like needles. Two of them, matched cloaks, matched spears, moves that mirrored without looking at each other. Armin's inner practice made visible. I did not want sight. The line was not breaking yet. The hinge was not yet Armin. Hanno's rule stood. They made me break the rule by going for Tiro and the Signum. A standard is a magnet for the kind of death that becomes a story. Tiro set his feet. He did not flinch. By this stage of the war, he could challenge me without shaking. He could also stand under a silver clasp without asking my permission to be brave. Both facts mattered. Signum stays, he said, more to himself than to me. Signum stays, I answered, and went to make the words true. I flashed sight on the first guard only. One nail of pain. First silver guard, level 16, strength high, agility high, spear, injury, none, skills, twin drive, rim split, link, pair timing. The second would strike the gap the first created. Hanno left, Capito refuse, I take first spear. The first guard's commit was beautiful. Boar brace opened and still almost failed because beauty includes recovery. I planted, turned, and felt his spearhead skate the rim and punch mail at my ribs. Pain bloomed, not a full hole, enough. I hooked his shaft, stepped inside, and drove him into Capito's stakes. He rolled, impossibly quick, and came up. Arrow step took me off his second line. My ankle screamed. I cut his knee with the gladius finally drawn. Short, ugly, effective. He fell. We bound him while he tried to finish the fight on teeth. Experience gained, 2,000. Experience, 3,550 of 9,700. The second guard used the exact second my eyes went to the bonds. Spear from the blind purple side. I caught it late on the scutum. The impact sat me down in red mud. Cassian would have called me a statue. The guard raised for the finish. Tiro hit him. Not a clean textbook hit, a standard bearer's desperate geometry. Signum shaft across the guard's arms, body behind it, feet slipping, mouth open in a sound more animal than signal. The second guard staggered. Hanno's hook found him. I rose in a smear of mud and pain and put my weight into the bind until the silver clasp tore free in my fingers like a stupid trophy. I dropped the clasp. Trophies pull the wrong rescuers. Experience gained, 1,900. Experience 5,450 of 9,700. Tiro's lip was split. His hands bled on the signum grip. He met my eyes and did not look away. You were late. I was, I said. Say it again if I am late twice. I will. That was the relationship refusing to freeze in protection. Good, painful, good. Capito pulled me close enough to smell his teeth. We cannot hold this strip forever. Numbers are a kind of weather. I looked left, right, back to the ferry. The chain still held. The fort still frowned over us. The red field had become a sponge. Armin's main weight had not yet fully committed, only the vanguard's teeth. If we stayed to win a pretty annihilation of those teeth, the jaws would arrive and close. We hold until Rufus horns, I said. We do not pursue. We do not bargain. We make annihilation expensive enough that mourning stops looking like his property. As if summoned by the word, Armin came down the rise. Before Merk advanced, I had the center drink again and rotate 2 spent contubernia to cloak drag. A spent man in the front is a hole that pretends to be a shield. Navius copied the rotation a little too slowly. Capito snapped at him. Navius snapped back. I told both to save their teeth for northern leather. They did. When the silver guards came for the signum, the whole red field seemed to lean toward cloth. That is why standards matter and why they kill. I felt the pull myself, the desire to make the fight simple. 1 body against 2, a story with edges. Command is refusing the simple story while still meeting the spears. The second silver guard's clasp in the mud tempted a man from Navius's file. I put my boot on it. Leave silver, I said. Silver is how Armin counts who can be bought with glitter after blood. The man backed off, ashamed and safer. After Merk's wedge broke and the paired silver guards went to bonds, the host did not collapse. That was the lesson Armin had paid lives to teach us. You can pull teeth and still find the jaw waiting. A screen of better fighters thickened on the rise. Not the full inner circle, not yet the walking catastrophe of Armin himself, but men who had learned Roman shield counts the way wolves learn fence lines. They did not charge, they pressed by existing. Every minute we stayed on the open strip, our wounded multiplied and our water thinned and our courage spent interest. Capito said it first. We are winning the wrong contest if the contest is pride. The contest is the ferry, I said. Pride can starve. Still, we had to keep the screen from deciding the strip was already theirs. If they walked us backward without a horn, the withdrawal would become a slide, and slides become graves with footprints. I rotated files the way Cassian had taught in winter. Tired men inward, fresher men to the seam, never all at once, never so neat that an archer could predict the gift. Navius learned by watching. His mouth stayed shut, improvement. A boy on the left began shaking so hard his shield rim chattered. I swapped him with a rear stake man and put him on cloak drag for wounded. He sobbed once in relief and then worked. Shaking is not cowardice until it refuses work. Gaius sent a polished suggestion by runner, a smart thrust to decapitate the screen, using his reserve and my center. On a wax tablet, it looked like boldness. On the red field, it looked like a way to hand Armin a denser target. I wrote back 1 line, hold, Rufus horns, no invented war. Ilias copied it, Livia sealed it. Gaius would hate the seal more than the words. Hanno, wrist already swelling from an earlier knock, tested his fingers and cursed. If the tall one comes, I want my hook in my good hand. You will have it, I said. If I say pull, you pull, even if I look like I am winning a song, especially then. Tiro planted the signum and spoke without looking at me, which meant the words were for both of us. When Armin comes, do not become a duel that forgets the centuries. Say it if I forget, I will. The screen parted, not wide, a corridor of respect and murder. Armin's vanguard made a throat for their champion to walk through, and the red field seemed to tilt toward him like a plate toward a knife. I felt the itch to look with sight from 100 paces out. The itch was already eagle-breaker working at distance, or else only my own stupid hunger wearing its mask. I kept the panel shut and my eyes ordinary. Cassian's voice from the rear post. Intervals, not legends. I raised my spare scutum. The rim was already chewed. My chest bruise throbbed in time with my pulse. Vitality 14 made the throb survivable. It did not make it quiet. Capito, if I fall, you call, I said. I heard you the first time, Capito said. Try not to make me rich in responsibilities. Navius whispered, Mars and Minerva. Mars can wait, I said. Minerva too. Watch your seam. Armin walked, and the day narrowed. What happened next would be written by men who were not there as a single combat that decided the North. What happened next was a spear, a counter built for eyes like mine, 3 centuries trying not to become spectators, and a black horn waiting in Rufus's hands like a merciful blade. I stepped 1 pace forward of the signum, and no farther. Stay dressed, I told the line. If you love me, do not follow me into his math. Some of them hated that order. Hatred kept them alive. Armin's half-smile said he understood the order and would charge me interest on it anyway. While the screen pressed by existing, I sent scouts 20 paces and no more along the fringe to count pony pairs and fresh poles. They came back with numbers Ilias wrote twice. Numbers are not courage. Numbers keep courage from lying. Cassian cane-tapped a man who had begun praying too loudly. "Pray with your feet," he said. I did not know it would be among the last orders I would hear him give on that field. If I had known, I might have done something stupid. Not knowing let me do my job. Mercy comes in ugly packaging. Rufus sent one more tablet. Upstream faint confirmed as poles without full decking. Do not thin. Black horn reserved for true pull. I had Tiro flash the signum in acknowledgement. 3 centuries saw the flash and settled a fraction. Settling is a skill. We were learning it under tuition we could not afford and could not refuse. He did not run, he walked, and the vanguard opened around him the way flesh opens around a spear already inside the wound. Dark cloak, silver boar clasp, spear taller than the men who tried not to look like they were measuring themselves against him. Up close, the hostage years in Roman lands showed in the way he read our intervals. He understood what a signum meant. He understood what a cracked replacement scutum meant. He understood me well enough to smile with only half his mouth. Cassian, from the rear post, bellowed, "Do not duel him, idiot." Armin heard it and answered in clear Latin, "Listen to the lame veteran, Eagle, or do not, I collect either way." Rufus's horn gave a warning flutter from the ferry. "Hold, do not chase, do not become a story." I raised my spare scutum and felt Vitality 14 argue with the bruise on my ribs. I needed to know. That need was the first trap. Eagle sight tore open harder than any flash all day. The pain was not a nail. It was a door slammed on my face. Armin Sarik, level 27, strength 24, endurance 22, agility 19, vitality 23, injury none. Skills, Spear Lord, Iron March, Eagle Breaker. Eagle Breaker burned brighter than the others, as if the system itself hated naming it near me. Sight tried to stay open. Something in the skill baited the staying. Edges became too sharp. Timing marks ghosted along Armin's shoulders like invitations. Look longer, they suggested. See the true line. Be perfect. I held one breath too long. Armin moved. The spear came not where I was, where the sight ghost said he would be late. He was not late. He was early on purpose, punishing the prediction. The head punched my scutum aside as if strength 13 were a rumor and tore a line across my chest mail into skin. Heat, wet, the world tilted. Eagle Breaker was not a glow I could copy from a safe defeat. It was a counter built for eyes like mine. Bait the reed, kill the reader. I dropped sight by force. Purple flooded. For a moment I was a man in mud with one good eye and a body full of alarms. He struck again. I planted boar brace on a commit that was half lie. The skill flickered and gave me only a fraction. The fraction saved my throat and spent my shoulder. Shield hook caught the shaft and turned it enough that the head buried in mud instead of pelvis. I cut at his hands and met iron-bound grip. He shoved. I flew. Landed. Ribs howled. Vitality 14 kept breath possible. Barely. "You look too much," Armin said, almost gently. "Rome will make a Pole of you if I do not. Better my spear than their forum." Tiro moved the signum left, trying to pull Armin's attention. Armin's eyes flicked and dismissed him without insult, which was worse than insult. Hanno came from the side with the boat hook. Armin's spear butt cracked Hokano's wrist and sent the hook spinning. Capito's file pressed and was waved back by me because feeding him men was how he wanted the eagle soldier softened. "Interval," I shouted. "Do not cluster, he wants a bundle." They listened, some of them, enough. Armin came for me alone, as if the red field had shrunk to a private room. Iron March showed in the unstoppable economy of his steps. No wasted lift, no drama. Spear Lord showed in the living small motions of the point. Eagle Breaker showed every time my ruined left eye tried to open a predictive glow and found only bait. I fought without sight. It was like fighting in a house where someone had moved every chair. I used shield hook on the shaft thrice. Twice I almost lost the scutum. Once I opened a line and cut his cloak, not him. Arrow step took me off a finish by a finger. Boar brace caught one true commit and turned it into a stumble that would have felled a lesser man. Armin recovered as if recovery were the actual technique. His spear butt took my already hurt thigh. His shaft cracked across my helmet. I saw white. I punched the butt end of my gladius into his knee and felt it hurt him enough to earn a look of interest. "Good," he said. "Again." He nearly killed me on the again. The point entered the gap under my arm and stopped against the folded edge of a broken mail link and the spare strap Livia had insisted I wear like a boring religion. Pain became a color. I fell to a knee. He raised for the simple end. Cassian's cane spear, thrown from too far with too much heart, hit Armin's shaft and spoiled the angle by a finger's width. Only a finger, enough for me to roll through red mud and come up retching. Armin's head turned toward Cassian. For the first time, the smile went full. "Veteran," he said. "I will remember the hand." "Remember this," Capito roared, and the left sentry hit Armin's surrounding screen with a desperation that was not tactic so much as refusal. Rufus's black horn sounded, withdrawal, not collapse. The order we had prayed would come before pride wrote our deaths. "Back by files," I shouted. "Signum high, do not turn into a herd. Capito hinge, Navius ladder steps, center last." Armin could have ended me in the turn. He chose to wound the shape of us instead. Spear flickering out to take ankles, rims, courage. Eagle breaker pulsed in my awareness, even without sight, an almost physical itch to look, to predict, to be clever one more time. I refused the itch. A system whisper, cold and opportunistic, brushed the edge of thought as Armin's spear killed a man 2 paces from me. Skill echo available conditions not met. Target not defeated. Eagle breaker cannot be claimed. Under that, something hungrier. Warning, echo pattern hostile to host site. Claim path rejected by incomplete defeat and by lethal counter-design. I would have refused even if the path had opened. I had felt what it wanted from my eyes. Borrowing Armin's knife to cut my own lids was not power. It was agreement with his religion. "I refuse," I said aloud, to the system, to Armin, to myself, not mine. Armin heard, his eyes narrowed in something like approval. "Then live long enough to be hunted properly." He stepped back into his screen as if he had never come forward, and the vanguard pressed our withdrawal with fresh weight. In the breath after the system refused the claim path, I understood something I would need later when ambition wore friendlier faces. Not every bright technique is a gift. Some are traps that flatter your hunger. Eagle Breaker wanted my eyes more than my hands. Armin had built a religion out of punishing men who mistook information for time. I spat blood and mud and raised the scutum a finger higher. 3 centuries, I shouted. "You are not a gallery." They answered by dressing left and right, a ragged yes. Armin's gaze flicked over them and found fewer openings than he wanted. That, more than my cuts, made him step back when the black horn blew. When Cassian's thrown cane spear spoiled Armin's finish, I did not have breath to thank him. I had only the scramble up and the order to keep intervals from becoming a bouquet for a champion. Later I would owe words. In the mud I owed movement. After Armin stepped back into his screen and the black horn owned the air, the line tried to become a crowd. That is the secret danger of surviving a monster. Men invent either invincibility or doom, and both invent break the intervals. Someone shouted that the eagle had wounded the champion. Someone else shouted that the champion had killed the eagle, and the rest was only meat settling. Neither was true. I was upright, bleeding, half-blind, furious. Armin was whole enough to choose his exits. "Stairs," I shouted until the word scraped. Odd hold, even back, dressed to cloth. Tiro became a moving lighthouse. Capito counted like a butcher counting ribs. Practical, unpretty, correct. Navius found his voice and used it for once on measure rather than flourish. Hanno kicked a man who turned too far and then hauled him by the harness into place. Love takes boots sometimes. I walked the bending line with my gladius in hand, and the bent scutum hung from a strap like a shameful relic. Arrow step in short hops when shafts sought me. Shield hook when a northern finisher tried to make a name on a wounded optio. Boar brace, now closer to the practiced settling that would fully land only after Drell caught a shock pair and taught them mud. A file on the right began to run, not toward the enemy, toward the fort road. Pure animal arithmetic. Walls equal safety. Open red equal death. If they ran, others would run, and Armin would not need Eaglebreaker to finish the morning. I did not open sight. I ran them down with agility still 13 and spite at 14, and grabbed the lead man by the neck scarf. Name, I demanded. He babbled a name. I made him say it again. Naming returns a person to himself. You drop that shield, you still live as a man who left his interval. You keep it, you live as a man who came back. Choose. He chose the shield. 2 others with him cursed me and followed him back into dress. I did not thank them. Thanks would have made it a scene. Scenes attract arrows. Cassian should have been the one with that kind of ugly mercy. The gap where his cane-tap discipline belonged opened wider every minute. Ilias's report of silver clasps and a lame veteran taken alive sat in my gut like a cold stone. Guilt wanted a reverse charge. Guilt is Armin's ally. I put guilt behind the signum and made it walk backward with everyone else. Rufus's horn intervals measured our steps. Ferry mound growing nearer. Stake lane accepting us like a comb accepting hair. Some breakage, mostly order. Civilian faces on roofs watching to see whether soldiers were still a war or had become a wave. Gaius's reserve finally did useful, ugly work on the south fringe, knocking a pony pair into a ditch and not pursuing into vanity. I marked the usefulness without forgiving the hunger underneath. People are allowed to be 2 things. Officers are required to schedule which thing acts. At the stake lane, Capito planted and made the left into a funnel that punished chase. Navius copied him a breath late and still well enough. My center came through last, as ordered, which meant we took the last teeth. A northern finisher with a wolf hood leapt the stake on pure nerve. Boar brace, almost practiced in the bone already, took him and turned him onto his back. Also bound him while crying. Tears and knots can coexist. Keep moving, I told Orso. Cry later with water in you. Yes, Centurion. Hanno's ruined wrist made his hook clumsy. He switched hands and became clumsy in a different way. Still better than absent. Tiro's split lip bled down the signum shaft. He licked blood and grimaced. You were late once, he reminded me, not gently. Noted. Cassian is not a note. No, I said. He is a debt. Debts need plans. We passed the bucket station. Livia shoved a skin into my hands and watched me drink as if hydration were a legal requirement. It was. She had made it one with her eyes. Rufus wants you on the mound alive, she said. I want the honest sequence on wax before night. Armin, Breaker, Cassian, Chain, in that order. No poetry, I agreed. Behind us, the red field steamed faintly where blood met weak sun. Crows descended a little closer. Armin's drums took possession of the strip we had bought with bodies. The ferry chain still answered the current with true iron noise. Bent is not broken. I kept saying it under breath until the mound steps were under my feet and the saying could become a report. A northern horn tried a false withdrawal call in Rufus's rhythm, almost perfect. Almost is a cliff. Tiro's signum stayed put. Capito bellowed that he would kill the next man who obeyed a pretty lie. The line held through the almost. I put Ilias on noting the false rhythm for later. Wars are won by people who write down the tricks that nearly worked. When I grabbed the running lead man by the neck scarf, I saw myself in him. The day I had wanted to become anything except a body in a line. I did not tell him that. I told him to choose the shield. He did. We both pretended it had been simple. Pellis sent a boy forward from the ferry with a single question. Sink now? I sent the boy back with a single answer. Not unless Rufus or I say. The boy looked disappointed to carry such a boring reply. Boring replies keep rivers useful. Retreat is a technical skill. Panic is what you do if you never practiced the technical skill. We had practiced under Cassian's cane and Rufus's contempt. It almost mattered. Files like stairs, I called. Odd count hold, even count back. Dress to signum, not to fear. Tiro walked backward with the signum as if the cloth were a third lung. Men dressed to it, some cried. Crying is allowed if feet keep measure. Navius's clean sentry was filthy now, and better for it. Capito bled from the ear and counted aloud like a priest of arithmetic. White cloth, arrows covering. Green, wounded dragged on cloaks. Red, water for mouths that would otherwise invent desert in a wet field. Black horn intervals from Rufus, steady pull to the stake lane, then to the ferry mound refuse positions. Gaius finally entered with the South Reserve on the correct horn and took a flanking pressure off Navius with a polish I hated to admire. He looked at me as if measuring whether my blood made me more or less property. I gave him a hand signal for hold and cover, and nothing of my face. Livia's runners did not stop. One took a cut and passed the tablet to another without dropping the wax. Secundus, somewhere behind, would be refusing bright-eyed volunteers at the custody wall. I could not see him. I trusted the boring stubbornness of his character. Vess tried to cut the withdrawal into 2 corpses. He came from a ditch with a rearguard knot, aiming to separate Capito from center. Smart. Fatal if it worked. Center refuse left. Capito do not chase. Hanno with me. Vess's commit was real. Bore brace opened cleaner than it had at dawn, as if the day's failures had sanded the stupid off my timing. I planted, turned, strength 13, and a body that had already paid rent held. We broke his knot with hooks and stakes, and the spare hatred of men who wanted the ferry more than a hero's ending. Vess went down under Orso and a ferry hand. Bonds. No time for speeches. Experience gained 1,800. Experience 7,250 of 9,700. The red field pulled at our heels. Bodies, lost sandals. A mule again, someone else's panic animal, tangled in a broken ladder. I cut the mule free instead of killing it because seconds allowed mercy that did not cost a file. Small choices, large days are made of them. Arrow fire thickened. I used arrow step until my calves knotted and then stopped before the skill invented a fall. Shield hook caught a rim that would have peeled Navius's optio. Boar brace took one last shock pair and made them gift their balance to the mud. Cassian was supposed to stay at the rear post and then fold inward on the second black horn. I did not see him fold. "Cassian," I shouted, no cane, no curse, a gap where his voice should have been organizing contempt into courage. "Ilias, find the rear post." Ilias ran, tablets banging, spear awkward, brave in the way of clerks who choose the field anyway. Rack hit the withdrawal lane with a fresh chief's roar and a mix of ponies and axemen. He wanted the seam between Living Order and the Fort Road. If he took it, the red field would pour into the Vicus. I met him with what I had. One good eye, a bent scutum, ribs that grated, and 3 centuries trying to become a single animal with a limp. Navius anchor the road, Capito outer stake, center break the chief. Rack was heavy and happy. True commit, plant. The impact drove breath out. I hooked, turned, lost the scutum entirely when his axe took the rim past usefulness. Empty hands. Lock break ghost twitched. I ignored it and went to the gladius and dirty wrestling Cassian had beaten into me on winter mornings. We went down together. His breath smelled of onions and pitch. I put the pommel into his temple until the happiness left. Bonds. Someone threw a shield over me like a blanket as arrows stitched the mud. Experience gained 1,700. Experience 8,950 of 9,700. Ilias returned white-faced. Rear post overrun. Cassian is not among the walking. Men say silver clasps took a lame veteran alive. They wanted him talking. They wanted you watching them take him. The words landed harder than Armin's spear. Tiro's voice cut in, raw. "We go back." "No," I said, and the word tasted like iron and betrayal. Black Horn stands. If we go back as a herd, Armin gets the ferry, the lane, and every name we have left. Cassian bought time. We do not sell the purchase. Tiro's eyes shone with fury that did not flinch from me. "Then we buy him back later. Say it. We buy him back later," I said. "On a plan, not on guilt." Hanno, wrist swelling, spat blood. Plan had better come soon. Soon, I said. First we remain an army. We folded through the stake lane, refugee slingers covered with the last stones. Sava threw vinegar in a man's eyes. Enemy or clumsy friend, I did not ask in the second it happened. Marked roofs held civilians. A few fools ran toward the fort gate and were beaten back into order by Capito's Optio with the flat of a blade. Cruel, correct. Pellis had the ferry deck ready for sink if ordered. Rufus stood on the mound with a face like a closed gate and eyes that counted. Report, he said when I climbed the steps on legs that belonged to someone older. Vanguard broken from the ford and the open strip. Host not annihilated. Armin entered, nearly killed me, withdrew into his screen. Eaglebreaker is a sight-punishing counter. I refused any claim path. Cassian taken alive on the rear post during withdrawal. Chain holds, custody unopened. 3 sentries still answering horns. We are not pretty, we are not finished. Rufus nodded once. You bought the fort a day, maybe 2. Do not spend them on speeches. Gaius arrived polished with other men's mud on his boots. A rescue will be ordered when it is not a second annihilation, Rufus said. Get your reserve on the inner stakes. Livia took my chin, looked at the left eye, and did not soften her voice. You are close to useless if you flash again today. Then I will be useful with 1 eye and 3 sentries, I said. 2.5, Capito muttered, then louder. 2.5 that still stand. Behind us on the red field, Armin's drums changed again. Not construction, possession. They held the strip we had bought time with blood. They did not yet hold the chain. That difference was the entire war for this hour. The stake lane received us with the kindness of a tool, not a mother. Stakes tear as they save. A civilian tried to press a cup of beer into my hands as I passed. I passed it to Hanno, who drank and kept moving. Kindness must be scheduled, or it becomes a snag. I kept scanning for Cassian's cane-tap silhouette and finding only absence. Each absence struck harder than the last. Tiro saw my scan and said, hard as a nail. Debt, plan, not reverse charge. He was right. I hated the rightness enough to obey it. At the inner stakes, Capito grabbed my harness and shook once. You are leaking, he said. Leak later, I said. He snorted and shoved me toward the mound. Grey men do not cuddle. They keep you pointed at the next necessary minute. Rufus's horn intervals came steady as a heartbeat we had borrowed. I matched our steps to it until even the frightened found the measure. Measure is not glory. Measure is how 3 centuries become 1 animal with a limp instead of 3 dying herds. Drell tried to make the difference smaller. He led a pursuit knot along the river fringe where willows hide bad ideas. If he reached the ferry chainside pins, Pellis would have to sink or lose. Either way, Armin's morning thesis would advance. Hanno, pins, Navius, outer, with me, the fringe. We hit Drell among roots and wet leaves. No room for pretty boar brace plants. I used shield hook on a willow trunk to spoil a spear line. Arrow step on root tops like a fool. My left eye was a purple lamp that illuminated nothing useful. Drell cut my forearm. I cut his belt and the pride that held his trousers of tools and knives. He stumbled. Capito's outer men closed. Drell went down spitting river water and curses. Experience gained, 750. Experience, 9,700 of 9,700. Level 17 reached. Experience 0 of 11,107 times. 1 free stat point available. I put the point into agility while kneeling in willow mud, because Armin had nearly ended me on timing, and timing lives in the feet as much as in the eyes. Agility 13 became 14. The body did not become Armin. It became slightly harder to catch late. That was all. That was enough to notice when I stood and did not sway as far. Lucius Varro, level 17, experience 0 of 11100. Strength 13, endurance 14, agility 14, vitality 14, intelligence 15, skill echoes, shield hook, battle ready, arrow step, novice, boar brace, novice, echo slots 3 of 3. The system warmed once more. Not a new echo slot, not a stolen forbidden pattern, but a rank shift earned in the only currency it respects. Boar brace advanced, novice to practiced. The movement settled deeper in the hips and heels, still conditional, still blind to feints, still useless without a shield line and a true commit. But the early-late stupid had narrowed. I had paid for the narrowing with a ruined scutum, a cut chest, a purple eye, and a field that would stink by tomorrow. Practiced, not mastered, not salvation. I laughed once, short, and Hanno looked at me as if I had cracked. "Rank up on the brace," I said, after the cart finally had a face. "Tell Cassian when we take him back," Hanno said. "He will say it should have happened earlier. He will be right." We secured the pins. Pellis kissed the chain like a madman and then apologized to no one. Rufus ordered the ferry deck half-drawn, a compromise between traffic and denial. Gaius posted his polished men where people could see them and remember who looked clean after. Livia began the written count before the blood dried enough to lie. We secured the pins twice over and sent word to the mound that the river fringe would not be the hole that emptied us. The rest of the night would be counts, cloth, and the open line where a cane had been. After Drell and the level rise, I stood under the willows long enough to feel agility 14 in the way my feet found roots without looking. Small change, real change. I did not confuse it with destiny. Destiny is what lazy reports invoke when they do not want to write about cloth colors and water skins. Hanno flexed his bound wrist and asked if practiced boar brace meant we could stop drilling cart rushes. "It means we drill them harder," I said. "Practiced is a taller cliff to fall from if you get smug." He cursed me affectionately and checked the pins again. Galen or the city surgeon, I could not tell through purple, shouted from the lane for me not to climb willows with a chest pack. I was not climbing willows. I was ending Drell. Distinctions matter. I would let them yell distinctions into me after the pins were safe. Night did not fall so much as leak into the fort through the smell of vinegar, pitch, and the red field's future stink. I gave Rufus the sequence on the mound while a medic finished the chest pack. Armin at level 27. Eagle breaker as sight bait and timing punishment. Near death under the arm gap. Cassian's thrown cane spear buying a finger's width. Black horn, withdrawal stairs. Cassian taken alive on the rear post. Drell at the pins. Levels 15, 16, 17 with strength, vitality, agility allocated in that order. Boar brace practiced. Eagle breaker refused. Chain held, army not annihilated. Rufus listened like a man weighing grain. "Write it twice," he said. "One for me, one for the copy chest. If Gaius's version grows wings, I want ours heavier." Gaius stood near enough to hear his name and smiled with only his teeth. "I will write only what I saw." "See more carefully," Livia said, not looking up from wax. I walked the medical line with Sava. Names, cuts, burns from the roof fire. A man who would lose a hand at dawn if the fever lines spread. A boy from Navius's century who asked whether level 17 meant I could not die. I told him levels were receipts, not armor, and that Armin remained 10 levels above me and 1 spear ahead whenever I got stupid with my eyes. The boy looked disappointed and then safer. Capito sat on an overturned bucket and let someone stitch his ear. "You did not do badly," he offered, which from him was a festival. Navius stood at attention until I told him to stop spending bone on posture. "I almost ran the right into a false horn," he said. "You almost, you did not. Tomorrow you will almost something else. Mark the difference each time." He nodded, eyes raw. Secundus laid out custody like a man dealing with holy objects that happened to be ledgers. 56 sealed remain sealed. 3 temporary raiders remain separate. Odo sitting sleep. Baran better breath than yesterday, worse color than I like. Field bonds outside the main register. 14 living hostiles of rank or use, including Kor, Fen, Bram if he lives the night, Ulf, Sarah, Jor, Hald, Torv, Merk, both silver guards, Ves, Rak, Drell. 3 more unnamed wounded under temporary posts. Dead on field counted by files as able. Full count at first light under flag if Armin allows the courtesy, under stealth if he does not. Cassian, open line. Witnesses agree silver clasps, alive at take, cane left in mud. We recovered the cane. He held it out. I took Cassian's cane. The wood was worn smooth where his hand had hated the world into order. It was heavier than a cane should be, or else I was weaker than a centurion should be. Keep it at the signum post, I said. Not as a relic, as a reminder we are short a voice. Tiro accepted it and set it against the signum socket. Men saw. Men understood without a speech. I ate bread that tasted of ash and salt and forced the swallows because Endurance 14 still needs material. I drank. I refused wine. Wine makes panels look like answers. Hanno slept sitting up with his wrist elevated, muttering fairy songs. Also cleaned blood from a shield boss until it shone like apology. Ilias finally wrote without walking into anything, listing signal times and cloth counts. Pellis sent word that the chain pins were doubled and the cut rope watch remained doubled. Small, boring victories. I collected them like a miser. Livia sat beside me on the steps with 2 finished tablets and a 3rd unfinished. Rome will ask if you sought single combat. I sought to keep 3 centuries from becoming a story Armin tells to children, I said. He walked to me. I did not walk past my signum more than 1 pace. Good, that is defensible. Also true, which helps. Cassian is not solved on this wax, she said, softer. Do not try to solve him by destroying the army he saved. That is how guilt writes host orders. I nodded. The nod hurt my ribs. Across the fields, fires multiplied. Somewhere in that constellation, Armin sat with a prisoner who would insult him in 2 languages and spit on silver clasps. The thought was almost comforting. Cassian was hard to keep alive if you needed silence. Armin needed information. Information keeps mouths breathing. Sleep, Livia said. I will wake you for the 2nd watch and for any horn that is not wind. Wake me if Gaius moves paper. I always do. I closed the left eye because it had already closed itself with swelling and purple. I left the right eye on the chain's direction until exhaustion took the watch from me without asking Rufus's permission. Before sleep took the watch from me, I walked once more to the signum post and set my hand on Cassian's cane. The wood held the shape of his grip. I spoke quietly, not as prayer, as contract. I will not spend the army to decorate my guilt. I will come with a plan, with scouts, with men who know horns, and I will bring you back or bring back the truth of why I could not. Stay alive long enough to call me idiot for the delay. Tiro, not asleep, answered for the dark. He will. Good, I said. On the far fields, a single laugh rose and was silenced. The same kind of thin human failure we had heard the night before. Armin's host was still made of people. People make mistakes. People can be beaten by other people who refuse to become legends first and workmen never. I lay down on a cloak that smelled of pitch and river and red mud. The panel stayed closed. The chain ticked against its posts in the current. Somewhere a child coughed and was soothed. Ordinary sounds remained a wall. Rufus's 2nd watch captain touched my shoulder at the appointed hour. I rose without knowing whether I had slept or only sunk. The left eye would not open fully. The right found Tiro, the signum, the cane, and the dark fields where a debt waited. Still here, Tiro said. Still here, I answered, and buckled a 3rd scutum of the day, knowing that wood cracks, eyes bleed, champions bait, and an army that still answers a horn is not yet a grave road. Armin had taken the red field's open strip and 1 veteran. He had not taken the river's iron, the fort's seals, or the 3 centuries' names. That was the day. The next day would begin with scouts, wax, and the refusal to confuse speed with rescue. I dreamed in the brief sink before 2nd watch of marble knives turning into ferry pins, and of Cassian's cane tapping Armin's spear until the spear apologized. Dreams are liars. I woke to the chain's true iron and preferred the lie less than the iron, which is how you know you are still fit for command. I checked the panel once more before the 2nd watch fully claimed me, not for comfort, for the same inventory habit that had kept me honest under marble and under mud. Lucius Varro, level 17, experience 0 of 11100, Strength 13, Endurance 14, Agility 14, Vitality 14, Intelligence 15, Skill Echoes, Shield Hook, Battle Ready, Arrow Step, Novice, Boar Brace, Practiced, Echo Slots 3 of 3, no forbidden counter stolen from a man I had not defeated, no fantasy that stats had solved panic or filled skins, only receipts, wounds, a river still chained, and a cane at the signum post, waiting for a hand that was not there.